what's the question you got for me?
Um, what was your reaction once you realized the oxygen pump had exploded?
Well, my feelings were just a sick feeling in my stomach of sadness, because I knew we lost I only thought we lost one tank of the two tanks, and I knew we could not land on the moon. So I knew I'd lost my chance to walk on the moon. So I had done a lot of work getting ready and training, long time. In fact, I trained for 2 previous flights that I didn't fly as a backup. And so I knew in one instant, my chance to go land on the moon and walk on the moon is gone. So I was really sad.
Next question. What caused your interest in being an astronaut?
Well, when I was, you have to remember my age, when I was young and growing up and even through college, there were no astronauts, real astronauts. There was a fellow named Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon, who were in movies or serials at the movie show, but there was no space program yet. So I got interested more in aviation, flying airplanes, and became a military pilot, fighter pilot in Marine Corps, 2 fighter squadrons. And it was during that period that I got interested in becoming a test pilot. There still wasn't astronauts yet. And so I went back to school to get an engineering degree, which is one of the requirements to be a test pilot, and went to work for NASA just about the time the space program came about, and they picked the very first astronauts, the first 7. That was in 1959. They had picked them, but I knew I was not senior enough yet. I didn't have enough experience, so I couldn't apply yet to be an astronaut. And I wasn't sure I wanted to be, because I was having a lot of fun flying airplanes, testing airplanes. So I spent 3 years at Lewis Research Center in Cleveland at the NASA center there, and then went to Edwards Air Force Base, where NASA had their premier flight test base in California. And I served there another 3.5 years, and finally decided I should apply, even though I still worried that it was not going to be as much fun being an astronaut, because there's a lot of meetings. You spend a lot of time in simulators, not real flying machines, getting ready to fly the spacecraft. Whereas I was flying a lot of different airplanes, doing 3 different test programs at the same time. So I realized, though, that if I wanted to go to the moon, and that was what intrigued me, the thought of being able to go to the moon, I was going to have to become an astronaut. So I applied and was accepted, and the rest is history.
Okay, last question. What was your first thought when you arrived back home?
Well, my first thought when I got back home was, wow, this is great. We survived what was a real set of challenges many had never been thought of you'd ever have to face. See, the explosion itself, when it happened, explosions in general in spacecraft were thought to be of a magnitude that would cause a magnitude that you would lose the crew, you'd die, and you'd lose the vehicles. So there was no planning to handle a situation that we'd had this explosion, which shut the mothership down completely, and we're still alive. So that caused them a big problem, because they had no plans. If we weren't around anymore, they weren't going to have to worry about it, right? So that's what caused a lot of scrambling and hard work, and a lot of people on the ground not getting much sleep, trying to figure workarounds to get us home. All right.
Drew, what's your question, buddy?
Only 2. My first one, I know you were in the Navy, but what did you do as a kid?
What did I do as a kid? Well, I was, I guess, I played a lot of things around the water, because I lived in Biloxi. So always down on the beach. There wasn't a beach, incidentally, only one beach by Buena Vista Hotel, which is gone, and one at Long Beach. and one at the point area by another hotel. So there were only three little beaches in Biloxi. It was a big seawall along there, and you stepped off right into the water. But they finally, later, in my high school years, dredged the channel out front, and they dumped the stuff from that up against the seawall, and that formed the beaches you see now. 30 miles of beaches along there from dredging. And I thought this was a big mistake because it was black, stinking mud. It looked like they dumped it up there. And I said, this is not going to be bad. But the sun bleached it all out. It became that white sand. So it turned out that they were smarter than I was. We got a nice, beautiful beach now. But otherwise, I went to work at 12 years old. I went to work as a newsboy for the Biloxi Gulfport Daily Herald, which is now the Sun Herald newspaper. And I had Route 16 in Biloxi, which had about 170 customers. So I delivered papers from 12 years old through finishing, graduating from high school. So I never could go out for sports. That was the bad side. I couldn't go out for any sports in high school because practices were always after school. And that's when I delivered papers. It was an afternoon paper. So anyway, I had all those years paper work. Now that was good though, because with 170 papers or so, I roughly earned $17 a week. Now you might not think $17 is much money.
Yeah, but
Back then, I could go to the Buck Theater on Saturday, which is right by City Hall in Biloxi, on that adjacent corner. I could go to a movie show for 10 cents, a dime. I get a bag of popcorn for a nickel.
And now that's $20.
Right. A Hershey bar. What as big as the ones you buy now, but a Hershey bar was a nickel. You get 5 Tootsie Rolls for a nickel. So $17 was a lot of money. I get a cold drink for a nickel. So I was rich as a paper boy.
So at some point, didn't you become a reporter? And what a cub reporter?
Cub reporter, yeah.
Yeah,
But
that's
I was at
cool.
near the last days of I moved up to be an office boy for my senior year in high school. There was 3 of us called office boys, and our purpose was to take routes when a boy was sick or a boy wanted a vacation and he wasn't going to deliver his papers. We took his route for that period. And we virtually split the city in half at Lemieux Street. I had the city from Lemieux all the way to the city limits at Rodenburg, and I had to know all those routes because I'd have to take the route if the boy was missing. And Freddie Stemwinder had the routes all east, all the way to the point.
We know Mr. Freddie.
Huh?
We know Mr. Freddie.
Know Mr. Freddie?
Yes, sir.
He had the routes all east of that to know. And Joe Wink was the office manager.
That is
Joe Wink.
awesome.
So anyway, I moved up in the world to that. Now, in my spare time, though, I worked on the high school newspaper for the Bulldog, for the Biloxi High Tide was his newspaper. I was sports editor, and as a result, I also got sideline jobs from the Daily Herald newspaper to cover some sports things like junior high games, Pee Wee League games. In other words, the big reporter, Jack Nelson, what he doesn't want to do, sometimes I got. So that's the way that works. I'd get to go cover the games, and I'd have an article in the paper.
And so once you got that job, what did the policeman call you?
Oh, they called me Scoop Jr. Jack Nelson, the big reporter, full-time reporter, he was called Scoop. So I was Scoop Jr. And sometimes they'd let me ride in a police car. I'd ride around with the police car. They don't do that no more.
That's funny. Drew, did you have one more question? Or
You forgot it? We used to play tricks on people while we wait. See, the papers were printed in Gulfport. So we had to wait around at the place on Jackson Street, not too far, right down the block from City Hall in Biloxi. That was the office. A big truck came and delivered the papers in a bundle for your route, with the route number on. And we'd have to wait there sometimes an hour maybe before the papers come in. And we'd play games during that time. One favorite game we had to trick people was took 2 people. It took teamwork. was be on the sidewalk on the side and wait till the car come, and one boy would run out and bang the rear fender of the car, and the other boy would go lay down in the street. So the person thought they'd run over the boy.
Don't try that at home.
No.
Okay?
Cars go a little faster now.
So some of them would get mad.
Yeah.
What would they do if they thought you were dead?
Huh?
What would they do if they thought you were dead?
Well, it's scary.
So I would be nervous, scared,
Yeah.
because thought they'd hit a paper boy. Then the boy, when you get up, and some of them would be irate, you know, you'd be mad, you tricked them.
Probably chase them down.
Yeah.
So then you just run around behind the building. Hide.
Or go in the building.
What's that?
Or go in the building and run up all the way up.
No,
He-
what was
he-
one story, little office was an office area. Yeah.
Well, one of the lessons all through life, you
Yeah,
can't.
you shouldn't show that part at school.
Oh.
But,
Yeah,
Oops.
right, yeah.
but one
We will.
lesson is, you know, all through life, you can't take yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
No matter what you do and what you accomplish,
Yeah.
you have to have fun along the way.
And you got to set goals. Dalton wants to be a mechanical engineer.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good, that curriculum, or today electrical engineering, kind of can cover a broad spectrum of things you might do. So it's not, I call it broad, that you could go into so many different kind of occupations, types of engineering, with mechanical or electrical. Some are very specialized, like if you're in geologic, petrochemical engineering, you're kind of limited then to that industry.
He got invited to a STEM camp, and he wants to go to. It's in Dallas, so I told him and encouraged him to go. So I wanted you to tell him he needs to go too.
I like how you winked.
Huh?
You winked.
I did? Oh.
So mainly, if you really want to be an engineer, as best you can, you read stuff, you talk to people who are engineers about what they're doing in their job, to make sure that's kind of what you thought it might be like, and you know, set your goals of what you need to be an engineer. That's pretty straightforward. That except it's complex to figure which type of engineer, because there's varieties of curriculums that would lead you down to one type. More complex today than it used to be. It's environmental engineering. That did not exist when I went to school. Worrying about pollution, you know, stuff like that, and dealing with all the EPA and environmental rules, either on the company side or the government side. Be involved in either side of that.
So, Fred, would you mind signing a litho for these
Sure.
young men?
And while you're doing that, I just want to say, number one, thank you so much. The boys were excited to meet you.
Okay.
And,
well,
we
give me
appreciate
the names
it.
again. Let's see.